Please. Great, welcome everyone to the September's Ruklan community meeting. Today we are joined by Kavi Shah, and Kavi is a PhD student in the McKellen Lab in the Department of Genetics at the University of Cambridge. And his research investigates lab evolution strategies for optimizing strains and proteins. He also did his undergraduate in Cambridge in natural sciences, moving on to a master's in Edinburgh on biology and organic chemistry. He's also the president of the Cambridge University Synthetic Biology Society and coordinates the Cambridge iGEM team. As part of his professional internship for PhD students in his PhD program, Kavi spent 3 months with Beneficial Bio, a nonprofit dedicated to fostering biomanufacturing and circular bioeconomy, particularly in the Global South. And with Beneficial Bio, he traveled across South America, interviewing stakeholders from industry, academia, and research institutions to investigate and discuss the advancements, challenges, and opportunities of using biotech and biomanufacturing processes in these regions. So from this, he produced a white paper on what he's learned, and hopefully that provides a comprehensive overview that can serve as a valuable resource for policymakers, investors, practitioners alike. So I think I'm just going to leave it there and pass it on to Kavi to take it away and tell us a bit more.
Thanks, Yankee, for the introduction. Hopefully you can see my screen now. And cool. Is that all good?
It's not showing up now, I'm afraid. Do you want to give it another go?
Let me try again. What can you see?
Nothing right yet. Nothing yet. Worked perfectly well on our trial run, and now it fails.
Yeah. Now?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. Perfect. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Also going to pause you briefly. It's now not showing your screen that you're presenting at earlier either. It's just saying click here to exit full screen, at least for me.
Okay. I'm on. So
are you on two different screens? You might be sharing the wrong screen.
I'm only on one screen.
No worries, take your time. Try that again.
Let me try again. To share the screen. Share the screen. Maybe this will be better.
That works.
Cool.
And yeah, perfect.
Perfect. Sorry about that. So yeah, I'll be talking a little bit about my internship in South America, which was producing a white paper about biomanufacturing and the advantages, challenges, and opportunities. So yeah, let's get started. So just to start off with, I'll give you a bit of background about Beneficial Bio. I'm sure many of you might have heard of it before, but for those who don't know, Beneficial Bio is a non-profit dedicated to fostering biomanufacturing and a circular bioeconomy, particularly in the Global South. It was set up by Jenny Malloy, and the goal is to help labs around the world secure reagents quickly and economically. And there's generally 5 pillars in the area of change, which includes supplying molecular biology reagents, consumables, and equipment at affordable prices, supporting with initial materials and ongoing technical support, supporting manufacturing and the setup of capacity, including molecular biology reagents and equipment, building a community, and also vocational training. And that includes workshops. And one example of a project that Beneficial Bio has been working with recently is the Feed the Future Striga Smart Sorghum project for Africa, which partners with different universities and institutes in Africa to produce Striga-resistant sorghum, and Striga is a parasite that's affecting the crop there. So that's a bit of an intro for Beneficial Bio. And so Beneficial Bio's aim is to support biomanufacturing in the Global South and obviously one of the areas is South America. But in order to do this best, there's really a need to understand the landscape and the problem, and this changed considerably, for example, through and after COVID. And so what we really wanted to do was identify who the stakeholders are, what are the current challenges faced by stakeholders in South America, what have been the recent developments in the past few years during COVID and post-COVID, and then try and think about the best ways for to support biomanufacturing in South America, both as beneficial bio, but more generally. And so just a bit of background before I run into why we decided to write the white paper. And so there's been a quite strong policy drive in many leading economies and also developing economies. This includes, for example, the US, where President Biden kind of had a executive order for advancing biotechnology and biomanufacturing, and that was followed by funding promises. Similarly, the EU have had recent policy documents released, and even one example from India. And while this is also the case in South America, for example, Brazil in 2016 released a very good overview of policy strategy for their science and technology, we thought by producing this kind of a document, it might be a really useful way to present what's going on and bring all this information together. So we had kind of a few aims for the white paper. And so the main objective was to provide a comprehensive overview of the strengths, advancements, challenges, and opportunities within the biotechnology and biomanufacturing sectors in South America. And this was to be done by consolidating insights from industry, academic experts, research institutions, and trying to speak also potentially with government. The paper aims to basically be a valuable resource for policymakers, investors, and practitioners. And so what we wanted to do was highlight recent advancements, showcase key strengths and successful policies that have contributed to the growth of biomanufacturing, and use those as case studies, for example, for others to look at and use, address the challenges hindering growth, identify opportunities for further development, and then offer broad policy recommendations that could be useful. So during my trip to South America, I was very lucky to be able to speak to over 35 individuals from 18 organizations, and that included academia and industry, and mainly in Argentina, Brazil, and Chile, but also a couple of members from other countries, for example, Uruguay. And it was a great chance to kind of meet a lot of different people working on very interesting projects and innovative startups, and kind of seeing the challenges and opportunities they face. And just a quick kind of disclaimer before I dive into it. While the presentation generally reflects the views of the contributors, that doesn't mean everything or everything will be agreed on by all the members. And there is a lot of diversity between different countries and regions in South America, and therefore not everything is applicable to every region. So that is one caveat with this kind of white paper. And so the plan of what I'll speak to you today about is to first kind of talk about reagent supply in South America, the challenges and the solutions. And in the actual white paper document, this is the last section where it brings together different parts, but I think it will be a useful presentation to this group. Then I'll talk a little bit about technology transfer and open source science, and then go into the SWOT analysis and policy recommendations, and then just a brief conclusion and outlook. And so kind of why I've chosen to speak about reagent supply is because it's a cross-sector challenge that's kind of present both in industry and academia. And it's the culminating result of multiple factors, which is why it's kind of a good kind of like a case study to bring together the multiple factors affecting biomanufacturing and bioproduction. And therefore, it can be used as an effective example to demonstrate what needs to change in policy. And so an overview of the reagent supply problem. So some key findings are that almost all the stakeholders I spoke to identified this as a problem. Prices for many reagents and equipment were estimated at 3 to 5-fold higher than that in Europe. And given that South America is a developing economy, this is kind of prohibitive. Lead times were often months, and for much equipment, there was a lack of technical support. So it is a real problem that, if addressed, could affect the whole field, and therefore is not necessarily something that's thought about. In fact, when I spoke to a couple of individuals, they didn't think it belonged on the same page as other bigger problems, for example, thinking like education, infrastructure. But actually, from the researchers that I spoke to, this was one of the main issues identified. So the factors that I've split this into are limited local production and lower trust in the quality of local products, import and export delays, institutional bureaucracy with spending, and limited distributors and exclusivity deals. And so I'll expand on those each in a little bit more detail in order to kind of tease out the factors that were kind of presented in the white paper. And so to start off with, import and export delays. So one of the main factors contributing to this is the commercial infrastructure in South America. And the IMF released a blog post recently identifying this as one of the main ways to boost trade in South America. So it's not just an issue for kind of biotechnology and biomanufacturing. However, as biotechnology and biomanufacturing are so reliant on global supply chains, it's kind of a big factor that can drive delays to reagent supply. And there are some unique challenges faced by supply of some reagents, for example, cold chain transport and rapid transport that's needed of some reagents. Also, some chemicals and other reagents are hazardous, and also that adds to the complexity of supply. And therefore, infrastructure is needed to deal with this. And so, kind of to present the problem, there were a lack of commercial infrastructure, and this can reduce efficiency of production and also result in delays to reagent producers, for example, being able to produce their own products. And this in turn reduces the resilience of companies to respond to global disruptions. And ultimately, poor supply chain integration has been reported by some startups to raise costs sufficiently in some case to negate the other benefits of producing in the area and also result in them moving production outside the region. And so a number of ways to improve this have been presented. And so one of the challenges faced in the region is the process of implementing improvement to infrastructure. And this includes planning, project appraisal, and budgeting, and difficult with execution of large-scale infrastructure projects and sustainability. So only by addressing these things may it be possible to kind of improve the commercial infrastructure. And I've split commercial infrastructure into transport, and that includes things like roads and rail and kind of transport, but also the customs infrastructure that we spoke about. And a number of startups that I spoke to, and I'm sure some of you in the region have faced barriers where goods are held at customs, even though paperwork is applied, and the kind of process of dealing with that can be quite cumbersome. Cool. So then to move on to the second aspect of this, which is legislation and regulation. So one of one of the big barriers identified, in particular actually by companies in the region that I spoke to, was the lack of harmonization in regulation between different South American countries. And this results in additional barriers to trade and additional complexities when dealing with customs and imports and exports. And so improving this could be a big way of reducing these times. The other aspect of that is lengthy approval processes and bureaucracy in actually approving products for import or export. And so in order to simplify legislation and regulation, cross-border agreements and country agreements are kind of really important, and they are being made. And there's one recent example is an agreement with Argentina and Brazil, and I think it was more recently joined by Paraguay and Uruguay for biosafety, and kind of a memorandum of understanding was set up in 2022 for the joint evaluation and authorization of products for agricultural biotechnology in particular. And extending things like this in order to create a kind of easier framework for approval of products could improve the process. So the second kind of major point was to talk a little bit about institutional bureaucracy with spending of funds. And I've italicized this because it's slightly different from the other aspects. However, multiple stakeholders that I spoke to, in particular in some government institutions, spoke about it as an issue, and therefore I thought I would include it. And so here, regulation of spending is obviously very important, and it stems from a need to reduce, to basically have traceability and control utilization of funds and reduce misspending. However, it needs to be efficient, and here additional use of technology and setting targets for approval and measuring the success could streamline processes and increase kind of the speed with which research can be done. So next, to move on to limited distributors and exclusivity deals. So multiple people that I spoke to raised this as an issue with not being able to directly purchase goods from suppliers, international suppliers, and rather having to work with exclusive local distributors. And so in some regions, particularly, for example, medical production, foreign suppliers are unable to directly deliver goods without a local subsidiary, and navigating also local distribution can be very complex for international suppliers. And so therefore a lot of international suppliers resort to the use of distributors. Similarly, the market size for some international suppliers can be seen as sufficiently small not to kind of have local presence. However, kind of possible solutions to this are negotiating in larger collectives. For example, multi-university or even kind of a whole university negotiating with suppliers can encourage kind of the presence of suppliers and direct purchases from suppliers. Simplifying regulation and improving commercial infrastructure also can encourage suppliers to be able to directly deal in the local market. And finally, government support for foreign suppliers entering the market could be a possible solution. And so all these together could reduce the problem of having exclusivity deals with limited distributors. And so finally, kind of one of the main points and also one of the aims of, I guess, Reclone Beneficial Bio is to kind of support local production. And actually that is something that is a kind of key issue in South America. So South America has some of the lowest production levels of laboratory reagents globally, and it relies heavily on foreign imports of reagents. For example, the gross exports of diagnostic and laboratory reagents was only 57.3 million US dollars, or only 0.11% of the global share, and 1.48 billion US dollars, or 3%, was imported in 2021. And so there's a huge reliance on imports, which is kind of more than 25-fold higher than the exports. However, due to the lack of requirement for expensive transport, lower labor costs, laboratory reagents produced in South America for biomanufacturing and biotechnology do have the potential to compete with international products, and some of the companies I visited present this quite clearly. The lack of local production, however, does contribute to lower competition and results in higher prices, and results in shortages when there's increased international demand, like that during the pandemic. So it's very beneficial in all aspects from a country's perspective to support local biomanufacturing and foster a local circular bioeconomy. And so some of the kind of difficulties with actual production from a local firm perspective has been the lack of scale-up infrastructure and expertise, some lacking support for small and medium enterprises and finances, and also quality control and certification. And so supporting these aspects could help support local production and improve the ability to replace imported goods with local produce for local consumption. And so this can be in many forms. For example, support for local SMEs, and that includes kind of financing of all aspects, from startups to proof of principle, scaling up, and different aspects of going from kind of idea to a product, aid and grants for certification, including ISO certification and GMP, good manufacturing practice certifications, which are kind of internationally accepted. Quality control and testing facilities that can be used by startups. The other aspect is kind of having scale-up optimization facilities and local CDMOs. So this often requires government support, and currently there are very few CDMOs in South America. And often what occurs is that startups develop a product and then have to go to Europe in order to scale up for production scale, and then potentially bring back and set up at production scale back in South America. However, this is often prohibitively expensive. However, the first few CDMOs are being, I think, are already kind of present in the region, and there are increasing developments to have CDMOs locally. And also technology transfer agreements for local production can help ensure that local production for example, from international companies. So I then wanted to kind of move on to the second aspect of the talk, which was promoting biomanufacturing with open source science and technology transfer, open source technologies. And so one kind of statement I wanted to make was that measuring successful technology transfer needs to be done by socio-economic impact. And so we'll get back to this shortly. But before that, I just wanted to plug the Open Bio Sharing Workshop report, which was really informative. That was produced recently by Sibeli. And it's a really interesting read and useful kind of document that links to this. And also that I visited the protein production center at UBA, which has also used reclone collection plasmids, was fully functional by 2023, producing proteins required for researchers in the university as well as outside. And so open source collections like those hosted by Reclone are incredibly useful for spreading technologies, as well as having the whole wealth of protocols and community support. So that. And so kind of extending from this, when research is done in universities, there's often a conundrum of to patent or whether to release the information openly. And so there are some kind of definite benefits for patenting, which includes protecting your intellectual property, encouraging private investment and commercialization. However, patenting does have costs and can hamper the spread of information. And an important point to note is that commercialization does not require patenting. And that's evidenced by some of the kind of startups who have produced reagents based, at least initially, on open source products, potentially then developing patentable material. And so one of the kind of issues identified in the area, and also when speaking to technology transfer officers, is that there needs to be a better way to measure commercial success and social impact of research. And that's not necessarily patenting, although in some offices, in some regions, a lot of the drive has been around patenting, which is a great drive initially, but thought of how to best commercialize products, when best to hold patents, and when to release information as open source is an important discussion that needs to be had in order to best support the industry. And I think the best way to go forward with this is to think about measures of socioeconomic impact, which can indicate how well the research is being translated into benefits for the country. So in the next aspect of the talk, I will move on to kind of just overviewing the SWOT analysis that is presented in the white paper, and then some of the final policy recommendations. And so I'll go through this quite quickly, and then we can have a bit of a discussion. I think would be great afterwards. So the kind of 4 key strengths of biomanufacturing and in the region are biodiversity, raw materials and biomass, the cost-effective skilled labor, and the strong foundational research in the region. And so biodiversity is a huge untapped resource of genes, proteins, chemicals that could be synthesized, and organisms that can kind of be translated through biotechnology. And it is also one of the aspects that is in highest threat. And there's a big need to characterize the organisms and biodiversity as large regions are uncharacterized. And this, for example, in reports to do with plant diversity, Colombia, I think, was one of the dark spots, which had some of the least characterized plant diversity. So it's a huge strength that could be harnessed. And when governments, for example, see the potential economic impacts of protecting this resource, then potentially it will also encourage protection of the resource. And so the other aspect is raw materials and biomass. So as a large primary producer, there's a huge variety of different feedstocks available in large quantities, and very interesting research going on into valorizing those different plant and non-plant feedstocks. And it's a huge strength of the region and is one of the factors behind, for example, the bioethanol success in many of the countries. And so extending on that strength in order to harness feedstocks for new different uses is a kind of great strengths. Labor is cost-effective and skilled and highly educated due to investment in improving education, and this will continue to improve. And then basic research, I think, speaks for itself. So some of the weaknesses identified was financing, and this is kind of a lack of financing both from the public and private sector. Overall, if you look at proportion of GDP invested in South America into R&D, it's significantly lower than many other economies. And in fact, I think Brazil is slightly higher than the others, but on the whole, it's under 1% of GDP. There is also limited private investment in comparison. And so improving this could be a great benefit. Technology transfer, I think we've spoken a little bit about, and scale up infrastructure, trade infrastructure. Targeted policies could help support biotechnology and biomanufacturing, and then also improvements in regulation and legislation and bureaucracy could also, and reducing bureaucracy could also support research and development. So there are some key opportunities that were identified, and this includes pro-innovation legislation, private capital. So there is an increased interest in the region from private investors, and a kind of encouraging inflow for investment, continued development of education and increasing the skilled workforce, promoting regional trade, and supportive policy frameworks. And so some of the main threats to development of biotechnology and biomanufacturing include financial instability, and that goes without saying, misregulation. So in particular, some areas are very strongly regulated and others have very little regulation, and that poses risks to both stifle innovation, but also there are environmental risks that go along with biomanufacturing and biotechnology. The threat of also the declining biodiversity, which is a loss of a valuable resource, and economic and political stability, which is also actually one of the hurdles to private investment in the region, is that it's seen as less stable. And so it can hamper the development of novel industries like biomanufacturing. So out of that, some policy recommendations were kind of put together, and that includes from financing and R&D, which is, I've split them into general science technology, policy recommendations and specific ones to biomanufacturing and biotechnology. And so that includes increasing R&D spend with stable funding landscape. So I actually spoke to a couple in both academia and who have had positions in government or spoken with government. And one key thing is not to have instability in the funding landscape. So even if there is reduced funding, if it can be stable long term, it has better benefit than very highly increased funding for a very short period. And also increased government support of private sector R&D, in particular for startups and SMEs. And so for specific to biomanufacturing and biotechnology, they could have specific funds targeted at the area. And it has been identified as a target technology by many countries in the region. And building on strengths specific to the country, whether it is certain types of bioproduction or health or the health sector, could be a good way. And certain members I've spoke to have identified kind of key innovation areas within a country, whether it is actually hardware associated with biotechnology or producing medicines that could be supported, and also then financing startups at different scales. Another interesting one that is used extensively by some countries in the region, I think, including Brazil, but less so by others, is fiscal incentives for R&D and SMEs, and that's kind of tax incentives for private sector to engage in R&D. And there are examples in the region, for example, of specific tax incentives for biotechnology, and I think it was nanotechnology in countries. And also, this doesn't have to be reduced taxes. It can also be amortization of equipment, for example. And then from a technology transfer point of view, I think one of the key points was to sufficiently finance technology transfer offices to employ skilled expertise. So one of the things spoken about was the turnover in kind of people at technology transfer offices and the need for a longer kind of term financing, need for targets based on commercial and social impact and less related to number of patents registered, improve targets for improving the speed of formation of agreements, and that was seen as a big hamper for having international and local partnerships. For example, having templated agreements and guidelines to increase transparency would also support this. And modifying patent laws and technology transfer laws also in certain countries, and increasing the kind of flow of people between academia and industry, and the ability for academics to consult with industry. And then specific to biomanufacturing and biotechnology, there's a real need for biotechnology expertise, in particular in legal teams within technology transfer offices, and kind of generating supportive technology transfer agreements which incentivize the process with an understanding of the biotechnology market. And so there are kind of other things which include increased presence of tech transfer personnel within academic departments of the biological sciences, and encouraging formation of networks. And so all of these are being done in different capacities, and kind of further supporting these kind of activities will support technology transfer. From an education point of view, increasing focus on practical skills and computational skills, and in particular thinking of teaching and examining which have practical skills and critical thinking involved, and continuing to expand on courses in biotechnology and biomanufacturing at undergraduate and postgraduate levels. And also here, collaborating potentially with industry to fill skill gaps and enable industrial placements is an important way potentially to both foster connections and also support development of education and a workforce that can support biomanufacturing. We've kind of touched on a lot of the infrastructure points when looking at reagent supply. And so supporting GMP certified, GMP certification and CDMOs for private and public sector research. Private and public CDMOs could help scale up. And then quality control infrastructure and certification help. And then finally, the transport infrastructure for biological materials and potentially accelerated processes for customs clearance of biological materials. And then regulation and legislation. So here, specific to biomanufacturing, there are certain restrictive regulations and also other areas where there's a lack of regulation. For example, microbial manufacturing and chemicals in some regions have lacking regulation. And implementing regulation in a way that minimizes bureaucracy with clear and efficient protocols is really important. And pursuing cross-border harmonization could support trade. And then the final few points are very specific to environment, biomanufacturing and biotechnology. And these includes protecting the environment and biodiversity and supporting research. And also forming a plan for the valorization of available feedstocks. And here, for example, America have put together a document planning how they can best utilize their biomass, and similar kind of thoughts about supporting the infrastructure required for movement of biomass and transforming it into higher value products could be a useful exercise. So overall, just to outlook, biotechnology and biomanufacturing are key to meeting sustainable development goals. Their key strengths of South America include biodiversity and the biomass resources, as well as skilled labor. And there have been many exciting developments and innovative research going on. The annual growth rate, though strong, has lagged behind other emerging economies, and kind of support from policy could help promote the sector. So that's everything. Thanks for all those who have contributed to the white paper. I spoke to loads and loads of different people from different organizations. And if I've missed anyone or spoke to anyone in passing, thanks to them too. And also finally, thanks to the Beneficial Bio team, including Rita and Jenny, and also the funders, the Centre for Global Equality, and from my PhD program, the UKRI BBSRC, and the University of Cambridge. Thank you. I will stop sharing. Cool. Hopefully that was all right.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. Muito obrigada. Muchas gracias. Using a bit of our languages here. Thank you so much for sharing the great work. I'm really happy to have contributed, and I'm sure everyone that contributed to this report is really excited about the outcomes. Yeah, we have already a message. So thanks from Brooke. Thanks, Kavi, for the wonderful presentation on the white paper. And yeah, so now we can, another compliment. So a lot of compliments on the chat. So please make sure to check that. And well, so now we can open the floor for questions. I don't know if anyone would like to ask a question. You can either use the chat or raise your hand on Zoom, and we'll be happy to let you open your microphone and ask the question.
I'm happy to get the ball rolling whilst people are thinking, or Ellen, you also wanted to talk?
Yeah, I actually recently, I'm having an opportunity to get involved in some UN program related to Kenya. And I was wondering how much of this translates also to sub-Saharan Africa, do you think? Is it the same? It sounds like, it seems to me a lot of the problems would be the same problems, same issues.
So I think there is some of the same issues. There are certainly very different contexts in terms of the existing infrastructure. So Beneficial Bio also does projects in Africa in particular, and I'm sure, for example, Rita, I don't know if she's on the call, will have much more to say about how things look in Africa. I think, yeah, a lot of it is definitely translatable. I think potentially the scale of existing production may be different between Africa and South America. For example, South America does have quite an established kind of biomedical production and chemicals production sector. And that in some ways...
They make our freaking airplanes in Brazil. I mean, they can make our airplanes in Brazil. They can make a PCR machine.
So there is definitely differences in existing infrastructure. But I think generally in all these kind of documents, whether it's the UK or South America or Africa, a lot of the points brought up do still hold in different capacities and to different extents. But some of the points in terms of streamlining processes or ensuring support for local businesses hold universally, and finding the best ways to do that, although are unique to like particular environments. You can pick up on some of the best policies from other countries and apply them in your own context, I think. And it's a great way for all countries, I think, to learn. So
I have to say, it's wonderful the way you organized everything. Half the battle is laying things out clearly and figuring out exactly what the challenges and strengths are. So thank you for that. This was really interesting.
I think we have...
Yes, Hita, please.
Hi all, hi Kavi. Very nice presentation, and I'm really, really on board with what Ellen just said. So it's very nicely laid out, but we knew that already when we were building this report together. So that was really nice. Thank you very much. And just to address, what Ellen was saying about this somewhat compares to what we've been seeing in Africa. As Kavi was saying, Beneficial Bio has currently a project running with Kenya and with Ethiopia. We've seen, or we have a bit more data, let's say, on Kenya, in which we've also interviewed a few people, a few researchers, and a few students from institutions in Kenya, and they all report kind of the same, in which the biggest issues that they face is not really the amount of brilliant minds that they have, of course, but much more to do with how difficult it is to get the reagents in, to deal with all the transportation issues, the cold chain issues, and definitely to do with how expensive things are comparatively to the global north, right? And we are hoping to build a report that is very similar to what Kavi was presenting in Africa, but I think there's a lot of contributing factors that definitely overlap with what Kavi saw in South America. That's true.
That's great. Yes, thank you for sharing. I'm sure everyone will be excited. And yeah, I'll let you follow up with Ellen. She just sent a message on the chat. And yeah, that's interesting to hear. I like, even from the conversations, unfortunately we didn't have Jenny joining us today. But it's exactly a bit on what Ellen also mentioned, that in Latin America, in a certain way, we already have a great deal of technologies here. And what you're seeing in Africa sometimes is exactly taking a step back of, and I'm directly quoting Jenny, because this what she said to me really impacted me, and it's moving forward with me being part of Reclone. Is that, exactly in Africa, you see a lot of labs that they don't have electricity. And then you get there, you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to teach you how to do a PCR. And they're like, the level of problems and barriers they have is completely different from, just going there and teaching them. But I think Beneficial Bio, Reclone, and of course, for example, we have a lot of partners also in Ghana. That is one of our Reclone hubs. Beneficial Bio, we're also working in Kenya, Ethiopia, I think Cameroon also. And you see a lot of great development coming from there. We have other initiatives. We see in Bio Africa, for example, with their association promoting the annual conference on SynBio and biosecurity. So a lot of great effort. So I'm sure everyone would be really excited to see also how teams are going there and how we can help develop that, how we can make sure the global south really shows its full potential. Because the good things we have exactly are biodiversity. We have a lot of capable professionals here, a lot of enthusiastic people, I might add. So really interesting conversations and talking about that. Kavi, someone is asking if the report is already published? I don't know if it already
No,
is.
it's not yet published. It's soon to be released for feedback from contributors. Some of them have already started to have feedback, and then once it's kind of finalized, then it will be released as soon as possible. Yeah.
Great. Yes. So everyone will be available soon. We'll for sure share both on Beneficial Bio and Recon social media.
Yep.
So make sure to follow us there. I had a nice addition from Joseph. So he also mentioned that what we're talking here is also reality in the Middle East. So there's no infrastructure, no real awareness on biotechnology. So this interesting parallels that we have. And
We
yeah,
have
so
a question from Marco, I think.
yes, exactly.
Yeah, hi Kavi. That was a great story and nice set of kind of problems and possible solutions. I was wondering actually on the distribution, is it just social media channels or something? Because I mean, this kind of thing that I think you want to get to people, not for them to
Yeah.
find, and kind of thinking I'm as you know I'm partly affiliated with University of São Paulo and all they talk about there is innovation. I gave I was there last month and I gave 3 talks on various aspects of startups and so on. And distributing these kind of directly to people would be great. I don't know if there's any plans or if you have kind of mailing list or something. It's difficult to do because this kind of affects everything from government to individuals. So
yeah, I think it's most important to get it out there as much as possible, and I think definitely if the contacts and contributors could spread it in their own networks, that would be great. I'm quite keen to try and publish it in a formal way somehow in order to kind of make it permanent and accessible openly as far as possible. And so, yeah, if you have any thoughts on that, definitely do get back to me.
And yeah, and maybe just a comment, kind of from with the academic hat on, I think some of the things on the innovation, you mentioned tech transfer and so on. I mean, for sure, they are, there's levels of problems in different places, but even in Cambridge, we are doing very well on that side. But it was only 10 years ago when it was actually still, more difficult to get things, through the tech transfer office and get them to know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the scale and expertise is difficult to achieve even in first world countries, let alone elsewhere. And the other thing that I don't know, I think you didn't touch upon, at least what I've found even at University of São Paulo, is that the incentives for academics to innovate are so much lower. Worse. If you come up, and they are very keen on patenting, I think, and so on, which is, I think in some cases actually wrong way because they don't have a way of actually utilizing the patent. But, in terms of if you commercialize something, the benefit for the individual is so much worse than it, for example.
So I talk about this more extensively in the actual report. And so it was kind of not so much in the presentation, and there's a whole section on technology transfer. But yeah, on the whole, I think the universities in South America, some of them are particularly kind of like we were 15, 20 years back, where the kind of incentives are not put in place. And as in the same way as we're, I guess, moving towards the more American way of kind of trying to provide incentives for individuals, they're also slightly further back on that path towards making it worthwhile for individuals to actually commercialize their ideas and produce companies. So yeah, it's definitely something we spoke about. And interestingly, like there is also a difference seen sometimes between the private universities and those who are kind of publicly funded, and what's the like. Sometimes the government sets rules as to how ownership of, for example, IP should be held and how the university is allowed to kind of lead that. So I spoke to, I think the director of OSPIN at USB. I think it might have been Andrea that put me in touch with him. But yeah, he was saying a similar thing, and trying to kind of improve incentives is definitely important.
very interesting. And yes, so Ellen asked if there's any way that perhaps the sneak peek of the report could be the presentation. Not sure if you want to do that, if you want to wait for the report, totally your decision, but we can definitely use the recon forum. So we already have the thread for today's talk. I think would be really great, especially if more people have questions, perhaps
we
other
do plan
contributions.
to release a blog post, which will be somewhat of a sneak peek for the final report. It won't include everything, but it'll include kind of some of what was discussed today. So hopefully that will help. And yeah, hopefully the whole report shouldn't be too long either. So yeah.
Amazing. Great. Yes, thank you so much for sharing. Well, we are on the time of the session today. I don't know if we have any more questions. Yankee and I are always happy to stay a bit longer, if of course Kavi is available for that. So do we have any other questions from the audience? Again, please feel free to continue the conversation on our forum, wait for the blog post, and then later the report. Well, okay, since we've gone quiet on the room, so thank you again, everyone, for joining. Thank you so much, Kavi, for sharing about your work. We're really excited to read the complete report. And yes, thank you, everyone.
Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any comments or even potential kind of case studies or thoughts. I'm more than happy to kind of, that's it.
Definitely. Thank you, Kavi. And I will be reaching out to you to find out a bit more, because I think we also want to do something similar on the UK SME kind of sectors as well. So yeah, we'll talk again soon.
Great. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, Kavi. That was great. Thanks, everyone.